you're paying more than $0 in bank fees, financial experts say you're paying too much. Mike?
Yeah, a lot of us are paying them, though. So KSL consumer investigator Matt Gephardt has been looking into ways to get those fees down. Matt, what'd you find?
Mike Dini, this study published in Magnify Money, it paints a pretty bleak picture of greedy banks. Banks collected $114 billion more in fees than they paid in interest over the past decade. But the man who actually conducted the research says it's not as sinister as that because fees, well, they're completely in our control.
So consumers have to be on their feet.
Ken Tuman is the founder of Deposit Accounts, who says he hopes his research will serve as a wake-up call to consumers who are paying bank fees when they really do not have to be. Banks are making a lot of money on the fees their customers pay for things like overdrafting, continuing to receive paper statements, or in some cases, even just the privilege of having a bank account. According to Tuman's research, the average bank fee per deposit account is more than $60 a year, and that has netted banks close to $350 billion in the past decade.
We definitely want to avoid those fees.
It's a very important story, Matt.
I asked Howard Headley, the president of the Utah Bankers Association, to weigh in on the research.
Looks like banks are just being greedy.
Yeah, I mean, but if you look at the numbers, you'll see that the fees have been incredibly flat for the last 10 years.
That's true, and in fact, fees actually ticked down a bit in 2020 with banks cutting customers some slack during the pandemic. Still, Headley agrees. Bank customers should be able to avoid paying bank fees altogether.
So if you're paying a fee, you're doing something wrong, and you need to acknowledge that and work with your bank. Say, what do you want me to do? What product is there for me that can help me avoid this fee? They'll tell you.
And if all else fails, some advice you might be surprised to hear from a guy who speaks for banks: don't be afraid to fire your bank and take your business across the street.
Listen to the fees, react to the fees, find something that works.
You know, one important note about fees, banks say they don't need them. They make the lion's share of their money on loans. And banks will actually argue that fees are a good thing because they punish just the person who did something wrong. For example, if I were to overdraft my account, that costs money. And if the bank didn't slap me with a fee, it means everybody else who banks there would end up having to pay for it. If you got something you want us to look into, let us know about it. The number, 385-707-6153, or you can email me, matt@ksl.com.
I guess you got to have rules, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you could socialize the problem, make everybody pay for it. And I think the main takeaway here is you don't have to pay fees. And if you just manage it correctly, you can get it down to zero, and that's billions of dollars out of consumers' pockets every year.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
All right, good info. Thanks, Matt.